Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning to the folks on Pacific time. I would like to formally welcome you to our second community conversation of 2023. I am Susie Bannon. I'm the Assistant Director of the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison, and I will be serving as your moderator for today's event. For those of you who missed our gathering last week, community conversations are virtual events that feature a conversation with members of our higher education and prison community. This is the second event of a three-part series that talks about Education in Action, which is an alliance initiative that connects higher education and prison students with work learning opportunities such as internships, fellowships, and apprenticeships. So the next and final part of the Education in Action Community Conversation Series will be next Wednesday at the same time. So please be sure to register and attend. Don't miss it. And to kick things off, last week I gave a little introduction about myself. I'll talk a little bit about what Education in Action is, and then you'll get to meet our wonderful fellows who will be leading our conversation today. So last week I did share a little bit about myself. My background with the Alliance. I was first introduced to higher education in prison during my own incarceration in Texas, where I worked as a tutor. I've been involved in the field in a variety of ways since 2013 when I attended my first NCHEP. For those of you who have been around for a while, you'll know that that was actually a few years before the Alliance existed. And I've also served on the Journal of Higher Education in Prison editorial board before joining the Alliance as assistant director in December of last year. In this role, I've had the privilege of representing the Alliance in a variety of ways, attending conferences, working with partners, supporting our wonderful executive director, Ved Price. And one of the joys of this position has been that I get to work with Leo Hilton and Victoria Scott, who joined us in March as part of a one-year fellowship that is a first of its kind endeavor, which connects currently incarcerated scholars with the day-to-day work of the Alliance. And you'll learn more about our wonderful fellows in just a moment, but a bit about the format for today. It is pretty simple. I'll ask Leo and Victoria a few questions. They'll discuss for about 30 minutes, and then we'll switch over to a Q&A for the remaining time. And if you do have questions that come up during the discussion, during the conversation, please be sure to drop those at the bottom of the screen in the little Q&A section in the Zoom window, and we'll address those towards the end. Before we get going, I do want to take a moment to thank some of the people who have helped make this community conversation possible by supporting Leo and Victoria's fellowships with the Alliance. So first and foremost, thank you to Commissioner Randy Liberty, Deputy Commissioner Anthony Cantillo, Director of Training and Education Laura Rodas, Maine State Prison Warden Matt Magnuson, Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center Leadership, Unit Manager Michelle McLaughlin, and Community Programs Coordinator Mary LaRoche, the Mellon Foundation, and many others who have labored to make this possible. And for the folks that weren't with us last week, I do want to share just a bit more information about the Education in Action initiative, including the mission and vision guiding it, and how those relate to the mission and vision of the Alliance. So the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison is committed to ensuring that individuals experiencing incarceration have access to quality education. We seek to create equitable professional educational opportunities for incarcerated people. To bridge the divide between the acquisition of knowledge and its practical application, we are launching Education in Action. This initiative focuses on the development of a sustainable infrastructure that will be capable of supporting the implementation of high-impact learning practices, such as fellowships, internships, and apprenticeships during incarceration. Through this initiative, we seek to cultivate an environment that transcends punitive frameworks and advances a culture of lifelong learning, personal growth, and holistic professional evolution. The Alliance's vision of Education in Action promotes an informed, forward-thinking network that wholly embraces the value of high-impact work learning. And this redefined perspective on labor within the carceral system endeavors to challenge persisting prejudices against and the stigmatization of incarcerated people. It's a pretty big deal, and I'm very proud of it. Victoria and Leo's fellowships are examples of what education in action looks like in practice. And during the first community conversation, we learned what education in action has meant to them personally and what this movement means to communities both inside and outside of the carceral setting. And today we're going to hear them speak about the realities of education in action. And then next week, we will wrap up the series with a discussion about potential futures for what education in action can look like. So without further ado, I'd like to turn our attention to Leo Hilton and Victoria Scott, our two wonderful Alliance Fellows. And I'd like to start with a question that addresses kind of the journey of education in action, which is not just the practical application of education, but the actual acquisition of the knowledge through higher education prison. So Leo and Victoria, you two have been involved in education in action from seed to sprout, so to speak. What are some of the struggles you faced in the beginning of your educational journey? Leo, why don't you get us started?
Sure. So as I mentioned at the close of our conversation last week, the challenges of pursuing education, let alone education in action, right? The application of this education professionally, those challenges are too many to name, let alone cover in such a short period of time. I think it's important for me to preface what I'm about to share about these challenges with a word of genuine appreciation for the work and the meaningful progress that has happened over the past decade that I've been in higher education in this prison, right? Because look at 2023, I started fall of 2013. It's been 10 years, and the changes have really accelerated with this new administration. And so a whole lot of appreciation to everyone that you named opening this up, and also bearing in mind three important things, right? That number one, this journey has been hard. Nothing has been handed to me or the dozens of men who have engaged in this journey with me here at the prison. Two, what I've gone through pales in comparison to the challenges and obstacles and roadblocks and adversities and oppressive environments that others have overcome before me and are still needing to work through across this country. And three, that I haven't done any of this alone. You know, it's easy to put a name or two out there and prop them up and say, okay, you know, look at this, what was possible because this one person made it happen. No, like the support that I have gotten and the encouragement from many different places and many different people along the way, inside and outside of the system, have really made this possible. And so with that, there are, from the technological, the lack of tech infrastructure here, right? Not starting with 11 glorified word processors in a computer lab when there were 16 or 18 of us college students, and we had to try to figure out how to make that work. To then expanding and having laptops so we could sign out for a couple hours at a time back in education, to then expanding even further to be able to bring them back to the housing unit under Warden Liberty. Now, our commissioner, when he was here, he knows the value of education, and he really put that at the forefront of the work that was happening here at the prison, and has since expanded since he became the commissioner. But there is, right, the going from these word processors to then getting the funding that we needed to expand and be able to have access to the internet. And that started slow, very restricted, very much monitored. And then as we built trust, as we built relationship along the way, the trust built and the access increased. And so while I was going through my undergraduate program of my associates, my bachelor's here, funded by the Sunshine Lady Foundation, got to give big love and appreciation to Doris and her team. May she rest in peace, and deep gratitude for those who are carrying on her work. But I was taking a full course load, 4 or 5 classes at a time, and working full time on the inside, making anywhere between $50 and $200 a month, working my way up to $200 a month. And then also going through hospice training and working to give back to my community while going through school. And it was hard, right? So I needed the people in the hospice program, Candace and my fellow teammates, to show up and support and understand when I'm not able to show up at my best. And really make time to sit down and talk and figure out how I'm doing. And that has been huge. And then stepping into my master's program at the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution under George Mason University, and figuring out what it is to be a colleague, right? When it's one thing to be a peer, a fellow student, but then to step into my professional identity, to step into it, try to figure out what it's supposed to be, right? Because coming to prison, gave up on that. First, I gave up on education at all, but the idea of being able to be a professional was just, there was no avenue for it. There was no pathway for it while currently incarcerated. Everyone knew that you had to get down to minimum and then get work release after getting community status. And so the thought of me serving a 50-year sentence, still having 26 years at the time, I had 28 years left on paper, to be able to operate as a professional, that just wasn't supposed to be possible. And so between not having the technology, not having the access, COVID coming through and opening everything up, opening the whole world up with Zoom, it just, the policies that were in place that have been in place for years that needed changing, like there's just, and then the culture, prison culture has not supported this. And so the work that we're doing is countercultural work. And so we've had to overcome the expectation of what it is to be a prisoner, the expected limitations that come with that, of you are only allowed to be so much, you are only allowed to do so much, right? And the internalization of those expectations, so that we become the internalized depression of this, that I am only capable of so much, the learned helplessness. I can't do anything more than what is expected of me. And so coming into relationship and in colleagueship with my folks at the Carter School and realizing what is possible, creating the working group on forgiveness and reconciliation, and working with my professors, right? Where my professor stepped from being my professor to being my colleague and my co-organizer of this space, and honoring my growing expertise in how to be able to do these things, to honor my agency, honor my voice, honor my professionalism and how I show up and how I support others, even though I'm in the position that I'm in, and having that honored and supported along the way. So the challenges are myriad. The support has been varied and widespread. But that's me here in a men's facility in a system that was more designed for me, for people who identify as men than women, right? So Victoria, if you could share about your experience, right? What challenges are unique to you being a woman? Because we know about the glass ceiling, right? That is just all over this country and this society, but it also exists in this system. So what are the challenges unique to you as a woman working to engage in education and action initiatives?
Thank you, Leo. That is such a great question. And I just appreciate so deeply you acknowledging that the glass ceiling exists in the form of glass bars as well, which can be incredibly disadvantageous to female populations in carceral spaces. Education is something that has always mattered to me. It's always been a subject close to my heart that I've been willing to fight and advocate for. And as a woman in a correctional facility, I mean, just getting a foot in the door was an uphill battle. It was a major challenge because, like you said, these spaces are very much designed to focus on male identifying populations and to promote the interests of investment in those demographics because the numbers are a lot higher, right? So that tends to get prioritized over the interests and resources that would benefit women. And it's hard to get a piece of the pie, so to speak, when you're a woman in a carceral space who's trying to better yourself and to achieve access to higher education. So that was really difficult in the first place. You know, as you also mentioned in an excellent point, these opportunities are often reserved for the end of your sentence, when it would be best used as a seed for growth at the start of your sentence. So you have something to work towards instead of beginning kind of late in the game and hoping that you might finish up in time for release, when you could be applying those skills more actively throughout your incarceration and stabilizing your employment futures before release, right? So, but that just makes a little bit too much sense sometimes when policies can be rigid and limiting and not project into the future or fail to evolve at the same rate that culture is evolving. And again, as you stated, with such wisdom, this is a countercultural movement. This is not the way that people who are imprisoned are used to viewing their potential, not acclimated to having access to these pathways. And it's unimaginable. It's a little bit surreal, and it can be a little frightening to have access to these deep personal changes and these resources and networks to be able to self-actualize while still incarcerated. So laying the foundation for those paradigm shifts and getting institutional buy-in can be particularly difficult. Our administration has done very well with demonstrating the courage to invest and to be able to trailblaze where there's room within the policy, or to realize when there isn't opportunity in policy to let practice lead the way, or to adapt policies to be able to develop into a more conducive atmosphere for the promotion of these investments and programs. So that's always been extremely important. And I really appreciate the way that our deputy commissioner was willing to open up an opportunity for me to be able to be a matriculated student from a higher security facility, which was unprecedented at the time. We did not have a degree program for women at Maine Correctional Center in the Women's Center. So I simply couldn't wait. And fortunately for me, he and other central office administrators didn't feel that it was fair to make me wait. So in partnership with the University of Maine at Augusta's Prison Education Partnership and with the Mellon Foundation, grants were secured to be able to make these investments, to extend these educational opportunities to women, to open up these avenues for parity and for equity and equality, so that we could make sure that everyone was getting a fair chance at a better future, but also to make the necessary technological investments, especially in the pandemic and post-pandemic era, to utilize the opportunities of the internet possibility, the way that the world opened up in a certain way at the very same time that it shut down, when people got more creative about how to be in contact and communion and to be able to exercise, practice, and continue to stay employed at a very difficult time for our nation. So that was a really wonderful thing to be a part of, and I'm glad to have been able to see it grow.
Victoria, do you mind sharing just a bit more about how women struggle for education and action opportunities, and how you've overcome the barriers that you faced along the way?
Absolutely, I would love to. These were not conversations that were first had. These were pipe dreams when it first occurred, about why don't we do this? The why not was unheard of. It was more of a defensive reaction that you might get when you asked about professionalism in carceral spaces, especially for the women, where we don't often try new things. We don't have a lot of that infrastructure that's necessary. We don't have a lot of the strength of numbers and staffing that we would need to be able to adequately organize and facilitate these programs. So because our numbers are small, our presence is small, which is so heartbreaking. And it means a lot of the time that we don't have the manpower to be able to, or the woman power, as the case may be in this scenario, to push for positive changes, to watch these things evolve and grow, or to pilot something new. So that can be difficult to begin with. And there's a certain level of surrender that can set in that's so tragic to see, where this kind of passivity can come in when people feel so limited and oppressed, and they just don't know how to be able to overcome these barriers. They don't know how to keep encountering obstacles and continue to push themselves forward, because there's a severe hit to the morale that happens when all you hear is no, or when you can't seem to summon the strength to continue to challenge adversity and to push against that and find your resilience. So the greatest asset that we've had have been partnerships on the outside with educators and universities and advocacy organizations and funders who have been willing to make the monetary investments, the investments of time and energy and partnership, have been willing to engage in conversation, not only with residents about what their needs are, but also with administration to inspire and encourage them to create spaces for these possibilities to take root and to experience growth. And that has been a blessing to witness. You used to have to get really creative for education and action opportunities. I remember when I first got here, I was taking a Blackstone correspondent legal assistant and paralegal certificate program. And I kind of figured out a creative little way to attempt to apply that. I was interviewing for a counsel substitute position, which is basically the D-board defense attorney, where you help other residents establish their defense for disciplinary hearings when they've been charged with an institutional violation. So during my interview, the disciplinary captain asked me, "Why would you be good for this position and why do you want to do it?" And I had said to him that I was taking this correspondent paralegal certificate program, and I wanted to be able to actively apply my skills as I was learning them, because I was also a pre-law student at UMA. And there was a practicum component to that I would not be able to access as an incarcerated person. And this was the closest thing to an apprenticeship that I could access at the time. So he fortunately gave me that opportunity. And from there, we've built into this partnership with the Alliance, which has been an amazing culmination of those things. But I'm not the only one who's faced adversity, even in a system that may have been designed predominantly to focus on male populations. So I'm curious, Leo, in your experience of EIA, what was the adversity that you faced and how did you overcome that?
Contrary to your experience, there was actually a surprising willingness to support me in cultivating the agency necessary for me to be able to realize my potential, right? Where so much about prison is about limitations, and the way the policies operate tend to be specifically limiting, and needing to operate within those, stuck within those, the rigid policies. I had been working with this warden since he started here as deputy warden, and then moved up to warden, and to cultivate a relationship with Commissioner Liberty when he was here as the warden. Because, small little aside, Liberty and I have been in each other's lives for 15 years now. He was actually the sheriff in the county when I was arrested, and has since seen me, right? So he saw me at my worst and has since been has been making changes that have helped me realize my best. And so the relational aspect of it that you mentioned, Victoria, about coming in, having a conversation, sitting down, working through the logistics, that has been necessary every step of the way. Right, Liberty did it when he was here as warden, about how to expand the access to laptops, well, computers and then laptops, to then Deputy Commissioner Brian Thornell, who is now over, he's the director in Arizona, coming in, sitting down, and working through the logistics of, okay, these are the policies that are in place. This is the way things have been. How can we realize the potential of what is possible in bringing about real substantive change in the system? What changes need to be made in order to open up pathways for graduate courses and then stepping into professional opportunities? What needs to change, right? Sitting down, the one conversation in particular with the deputy commissioner, warden, and two other incarcerated men here who are also in grad school and looking to apply their education as professionals in the working world and seeking real world pay to be able to show up and contribute in all of the ways that we talked about last time, to our families and communities and victims. That sitting down and talking through how will pay work, right, in this paperless world? How do we do direct deposit? What is the role of the business office and who is the point of contact? How many people are currently qualified to be able to engage in this type of professional avenue? And what needs to happen in order to give explicit individual permissions now, and how can that scale? So not just engaging in the logistics, but then doing a little bit of visioning work about how big can this grow, not just in this facility, but across this department. And so engaging in that way was incredible. And this is not some pie in the sky thing, right? This is not something that can only happen in a small prison in a small state with a small system. But this is something that can be scaled across this country, right? The Alliance is a national organization. This initiative is a national, working towards a national movement. This is not a small thing to be kept small. This is something that is possible when administrators have the courage to, and the bandwidth to, and create the bandwidth to engage with people, figure out who are the leaders, the natural leaders in your institutions, and who have proven themselves over and over again that they are ready for these opportunities. Start small, start those conversations, and grow from there. Because when you put your humanity on the table, when you allow yourself to engage with that level of courage, that is what opens up the opportunities. That is what cultivates agency, and that is what makes these initiatives possible. And that's what I've seen, right? I see it in here with education, with programming, and the same is also true for these professional opportunities.
Thank you both for sharing your dual perspectives. We've touched on the fact that our goal for EIA is to create a movement of change, and a movement that challenges the way that we think about labor in the carceral setting. And so I was hoping that each of you could touch briefly on how exactly education and action challenges the traditional model of prison labor.
So this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, how to challenge the structures that exist. So it's to be at this place of being in collaboration, genuine partnership with administrators, and seeing the shift in the department's mission. All right, the Maine Department of Corrections, their mission is making communities safer by reducing harm through supportive intervention, empowering change, and restoring lives. Education in action does this, right? Where that is the direct application, where the expectation of prison labor is unpaid work. When you think about what work happens in prison, it is unpaid and it is hard, right? And so what is possible, what we are creating towards this pathway of restoration and repair is paid work. To be able to pay, because what a lot of people don't know, unless you've either been in the system or connected to somebody in the system, is that part of a person's sentence can be fines, fees, restitution, victim compensation, right? But what people don't understand is that when you're making $50 to $200 a month, and in a lot of places a lot less, how much is actually going towards paying those fines, fees, restitution, and victim compensation? When oftentimes it's barely enough to be able to pay for the hygiene that you need for the month, right? So nobody benefits from the way that things have been, the expectation of prison labor. And so by opening opportunities for professional opportunities for real world professional pay, then that gives us the ability to make a real dent or maybe even clear up those fines, fees, and restitution and make meaningful contributions for victim compensation, right? Because here, victim compensation is paid out of the general fund. And so when we are able to earn this type of money, then we're able to replenish that fund to benefit directly the victims of our crimes. And another thing that people don't think about, or there's a whole narrative around child support, right? The people don't pay child support from the inside because they don't want to. But quite frankly, when you don't have the money to even to provide for yourself, how are you going to be able to pay child support? And so people are released with this massive, massive debt, even though prisoners are not supposed to be able to incur debt. We do, and it builds over time so that when we get out, we're stepping into this mountain of debt and unable to be able to survive and bear up underneath it. And so in these ways, education in action, these professional opportunities to apply our education, what this does, it benefits everybody. Thank you. Yeah, ex-husband made $40 a month, makes $40 a month, right? That's just over $1 a day. What is that really going to do to benefit everybody or anybody, right? So this opens up opportunities to benefit everybody, and in so doing disrupts. We can take the expectation, right? One thing I talk about is how, yes, we have set the precedent. We are setting the precedent right now, paving the way right now. And so how do we translate that precedent into practice? How do we take the expected norm of unpaid work and translate it into a new expectation of paid work? And by holding that expectation and creating this pathway, we're able to disrupt that, the structure of prison labor. And so that's where I stand with it. But I'd be interested very quickly, Victoria, if you could add to this a little bit.
Absolutely. I love the spirit of everything that you were saying, the way that this is such a synergistic concept, and it creates an ecosystem around prison labor and equitable pay and what's possible when someone achieves a living wage, what they can do that benefits beyond them. So the way that they can support their children by meeting their obligation for child support payments, and the way that they can pay taxes, the way that they can actually invest in themselves and in their communities by being part of the active economy. And that's incredibly important. Budgets dictate pay for institutional jobs that are not well funded because of the demand for allocation of funds elsewhere. So education in action relieves the burden on the purse strings and helps create a progressive ecosystem for employment where people can build trust within the institution and increase their level of personal responsibility. And then that can open up those opportunities for other people to come in on that ground floor to build those internal skills and then move on to education and action opportunities where they can increase their sense of progressively and understand that they're working towards something and achieving more instead of plateauing at a certain point and thinking this is all I'm worth. So there's a very important internal and external element about self-perception and about the way that you perceive your place in the world when it comes to prison labor, that on a national scale, education in action has a remedy for. And I think that that's very important and could provide a lot of healing.
Thank you, Victoria. And just a side note, I made $0 a month when I was incarcerated. And so this effort is just so meaningful and amazing. And I'm so proud to be a part of it. And I appreciate you both sharing your perspectives on it. I think we are right on time for a Q&A. And I do want to kick things off with the question and answer session by leading with a question that was asked last time that we didn't get to answer because I think it's an important one. And so I'll ask exactly the way it was written. The question was, I'd be interested in hearing from Victoria and Leo their thoughts on how funders can better engage with and support incarcerated scholars and leaders. Would one of you like to take this on?
I would love to take this on. This is such a wonderful question, and I'm so glad that it was asked. Funders can really show a tremendous amount of support, not only with with financial support, which is incredibly important. It's crucial to being able to organize and implement these programs and to make sure that they're sustainable. But by being present, by arriving and joining in conversation and community, by adding their voices to those of residents, and to be able to encourage administrators to open up these opportunities and partnerships, to be able to form relationships with DOC administrations so that there's an understanding there between them and that we're all working toward the same goal, to create that collaborative atmosphere where we can all succeed and that we can all support and benefit each other in a state of symbiosis. That's incredibly important. And in my experience, it has been the organizations that show up, that initiate that relationship with departments of corrections and residents, like the Educational Justice Institute at MIT and the Alliance. So, I mean, beyond funders, businesses could really do a service not only to incarcerated professionals, but to themselves by approaching DOCs and saying, hey, what are your technological capabilities? What is your interest in having an employment partnership where we can use some of the untapped potential and talent within your walls to create these opportunities for self-actualization, personal growth, and economic involvement for your residents? So I think that that's very important, to be actively involved and engaged as a funder, as a business, as an ally, or as a citizen. Leo, anything to add?
Yeah, I know you asked if one of us could take it on, but I just got to put my 2 cents in here too. All right, so
Welcome to you.
yes, yeah. For funders, definitely come in, develop those relationships, because things are different. The people are different in every facility that you go to. The policies are different in every department of corrections that you go to. And so you need to hear from the people on the ground who are experiencing the lived reality of what it is to engage in education, and figuring out what the barriers are, right? Because we know the barriers that we've had to overcome, and we know the people who have supported us in overcoming those barriers here, but those are different, and they look different and they feel different everywhere. And so you need to hear directly from the people what needs to happen in order to be able to navigate not just the set, hard, concrete barriers that exist, but also the relational ones, right? One of the things that I didn't really talk a whole lot about is, right, an aspect of countercultural work is that people, especially people who have been in for a very long time, have bought into these limitations, right? I mentioned internalized depression. And so when someone is doing something different, when you bring something different, then prison culture says it's not going to last. You cannot trust it. So don't get involved, don't support it. And so there are the relational dynamics for people on the inside. And that also applies for staff and administrators, right? Whenever you start something new, it takes time to trust it. It's not going to be just one more piece of spaghetti thrown at the wall over the generations, right, of trying to figure out what works, but that this is something real. And so you need to hear from the people, from the student professionals who know what's needed. And so, yes, Victoria, beautiful. It's not just funders who can do this, right? There are businesses, potential employers. Come in relationship, reach out to the Alliance, right? This is what we do. We pair people up, right? Get in touch with us on, figuring out and help educate yourselves on what your local DOC is doing. And if the DOC is willing to open up opportunities like this, if you are part of higher education and prison faculty or organizers, and the same goes for family members, friends, loved ones on the outside, right? Reach out to local employers and let them know, hey, there's this thing happening right now. Are you interested in doing this? Are you interested, educate yourself. And because again, local businesses, they got to do what they got to do. And so you can do the homework for them, say, hey, I did this homework and this is what you can benefit from. And this is how your business can benefit. And these are the next steps you can take. You can reach out to the Alliance, you can reach out to the DOCs and see what's possible. And DOC administrators, right? Yeah, no one is safe from this. There's a call to action here for everybody. You're not going to leave here thinking that there's nothing you can do. So DOC administrators can join this conversation with the Alliance and other DOCs who are doing this work across the country. right? This does not and cannot be a siloed initiative. This has to be national. We have to grow. And so DOC administrators can reach out, like I know is happening across the country right now, and see what's possible, learn from each other, grow with each other to support this shift. And of course, I have to close with a shameless plug for the landing page for Education in Action. Maybe one of us can drop it in the chat here in a minute, where you can express your interest in getting involved in this work. Whether you are connected to somebody on the inside who is at a point of professionalization, or you are someone, you run a business, or you know somebody who runs a business who might want to get involved and be a potential employer for someone on the inside. Go to the Education in Action landing page and see what's up. Let us know that you're interested, and we can go from there.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for enlightening us, and thank you for covering everything, all the call to action, all of it. And yes, I just want to reiterate that the Alliance is about collaboration, community, and building an ecosystem. And ecosystems have many, many parts that all rely on one another. And so we want to hear from members of all communities about the ways that you can envision your involvement in Education in Action. So we have 15 minutes, and I see that Linda Small had her hand up. Linda, you can feel free to come off mute or drop a question in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to hear a little bit about creating pathways on the inside for other people to expand this program. What are the structures in place, or what are the structures that are missing? Because a lot of times, you know, as a formerly incarcerated individual, I understand that there are sometimes pockets of opportunities, and it's a very narrow focus. And part of that is control, right? And again, that's part of the culture. And wondering the expressed interest with anybody on the inside within corrections, and what are the structures in place to actually grow this for additional men, and particularly women, I'm interested in. Thank you.
Go ahead, Leah. I see you come off mute.
I saw Victoria's hand go up, so I was going to throw it to her, but that's fine. No, so for me, okay, so yeah, feel free, definitely support Linda there. There's a whole little connection here that is beautiful. But for me, what's happening here on the inside is these ongoing conversations with administrators. And I mentioned earlier, setting precedent and challenging the translation into practice. And so each one of these conversations is oriented towards, how can this not be just me? And at the Alliance, one thing that we're doing directly is working to create a cohort of interns on the inside, men, women, across facilities, any facility that is able to support this. And so we're looking for opportunities. There's one that recently came up, so it's even sped up the timetable a little bit of working to immediately open up these opportunities for people who are currently qualified, best fit for these opportunities. And also, like, I see it expanding. Like I just heard another guy just started a full-time internship at Jobs for the Future. He's losing his mind right now. I think he's on week 2. And he was mentioning yesterday on a call that he was like, yeah, I'm finally starting to see how crazy this is what life is. And this is what I'm capable of. So yes, it's heavy, but also like I'm showing up. And so it's actively happening. Individual permissions are being given for people who qualify right now to be able to engage in this work. And with each one of these conversations that I'm personally having, it's all about, how does this grow? Reminding that this is not just for me to benefit. It can't be just for me or just for these few. It has to be something that grows. Victoria?
Right, yeah. Linda, that is an excellent question that I'm so excited to answer. And here comes my shameless plug. The New England Board of Higher Education and the New England Commission on the Future of Higher Education in Prison have released a report recently assessing higher education in prison and employment opportunities, which are an integral part of that. This report is an excellent guide about how to create and strategize pathways that are equitable within a facility, that provide equal opportunity and access so that there isn't disparity between male and female populations, or male identifying and female identifying populations, and anyone in between, to make sure that case management services are involved in the screening and the conversations about the level of interest that someone might have in education and action opportunities, and to really invite case management services and Department of Corrections administration to the table to engage in these discussions and partnerships with employers, with employment agencies, with other partnering organizations that can support expansion and scalability, but also really solidify these pathways and the policies and practices that dictate the success, the hopeful success of these programs.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Any other questions? Please feel free to come off mute. You can drop them in the chat. Comments and feedback are welcome. Well, while everybody is thinking about their question, I'll pose one.
I'm sorry, I had a question.
Oh, yes, please.
Hi, thank you all for all of your insight. I do work as a correctional education site director. And one of the challenges that I'm hoping you all can speak on is how can correctional education students navigate correctional officers, not administrators, because administration will, impose, different programs. But the bottom line is those correctional education students have to navigate the correctional officers to get from point A to point B to be able to do that. And so for me personally, at my facility, sometimes I can't even get my students to study hall because officers are saying, well, I had to pay for my education, or I only get a 10% discount. You go to school for free and you get a, so can you share with us some insight or, some pointers or something of how to even navigate that? Because the CO and the lower level staff or who they have to encounter first and foremost?
I love this question. The struggle is absolutely real when it comes to those conflicts on the front line of intention versus execution when it comes to higher education and prison programs. And there can be a very tense atmosphere surrounding interactions with officers and line staff. So this is a really important thing to discuss. I think part of that is a little bit administrative, making sure that they are creating an understanding around prioritizing education, telling officers that it is not an option whether or not you want to clear count when you feel like it or when it's actually clear. It is not an option for you to escort these residents, these students, these prisoners, whatever you want to call them, to their class. This is important. This is an investment that we're making that A, will make your job easier in the long run and will make society safer in the broader scheme of things. So it's very important to do that. And another thing that I found incredibly helpful, at least in my environment, is creating situations and events that are participatory for officers, where they can actually see the growth and the change, the transformation and the benefits that are happening, not only within the individual, but within the actual culture of the unit. The positive changes that occur within residents that they interact with every day, where they can actually see that someone is trying to be a better person. And that can be inspiring to them, especially if they're actively involved with making those changes, with supporting those changes, or when they're even celebrated for advocating for them. So maybe a little, throw in a little party for the officers that do support and show up and show out and are good about getting students to class and are supportive of education, offering them a special award and a small reception to acknowledge that, to make sure that they understand that they're included in this journey too. And when we're successful and we win, that they're successful and they win as well.
Yeah, and for the for the students themselves, come together, support each other, and move with an understanding that that type of response is going to happen. right? That at the end of the day, these are the thoughts, these are the narratives that are not just in these spaces, but that these officers are also facing on the outside. Right? I can't tell you how many staff I've talked to who were like, listen, and professors who came in who were like, listen, I ran into this. I took my car to the garage the other day and told him that I was a professor and taught in prison. And he was like, you know, why are prisoners able to have free education when my kid is saddling not just themselves, but me with debt? And so these are the narratives that exist. And so for incarcerated students, it's important for us to understand that these exist. And so meet them where they are, show them a bit of understanding that, listen, we get it, right? And at the same time, there's nothing free about what we're getting. Yes, somebody else is paying for the actual funds, but we are earning the education, we are earning the degrees, and we are paying with our freedom. And we are fighting to be able to contribute in some type of meaningful way to our environment, to our family, to the people who we harmed, and to the communities that we harmed. And so try to help them understand the bigger picture of things, because it's real easy to get stuck in the smallness of the institution that you're in, regardless of where you're in or how big the institution is. The world, the feeling of it is tiny. And that feeling is not unique to the people who are incarcerated there. It's also experienced by the staff. And so express a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding on why they might feel the way that they do, and ask, right? Why do you feel that way? Not in an aggressive way, but actually ask with genuine curiosity. Why do you have the perspective that you do? Not when they're telling you what to do in the moment, because that just heightens the situation. But let things, you know what I mean, just obey whatever command it is in the moment, because you're not going to win in the moment. And then circle back and make time to talk to that individual and be like, hey, here was a situation. I'm interested to know why do you feel the way that you do about this? Right? I'm trying to better my life and my family and actually contribute in some meaningful way. This is the bigger picture of things. But so what are you struggling with about what we're doing? And actually make the time to listen.
A little bit of empathy and understanding goes a long way. Jermaine, I see your hand up, and Dan, I saw your hand up as well. Let's take 2 more questions. We have about 3 minutes, so we can make them fast.
Great, thanks so much, Victoria and Leo. I have the highest esteem for you both, right? I'm formerly incarcerated, and so I started developing databases. When I was away, I was using Microsoft Access. We didn't have internet access, and everywhere I went, I developed databases. And so I remember on like my day prior to release, an officer told me, he said, man, they used you, right? And so today I work as an energy regulator. I'll be home 10 years this year. I received a pardon about 4 years ago. I am a bona fide cybersecurity professional. My question was, is there any sort of programming coming down the pipe that relates to tech, big tech, especially the cloud? The reason is because when it comes to AWS, Microsoft Azure, GCP, Google Cloud Platform, all of these platforms can be accessed via web browser, and the training is like self-sustained, right? And so it's free. And one can simply log in, the progress is tracked. And, all of this leads to industry recognized skill sets as well as credentials, the certifications. Thanks.
Jermaine, I'm so glad you brought that up. That is so important. We have had some success with that in the MDOC, and I would love to see so much more growth in that area because it's a highly marketable skill. It is in high demand right now, and in our technological age, this is ever important to the evolution of how our society functions and relates to each other. So I love that question. Currently at MCC, we have been engaged with the Educational Justice Institute at MIT, who has been offering courses in web coding and design, Brave Beyond Bars, and there's a Python coding class, Code Your Dreams, which is super great. And with the Alliance, as part of my fellowship, I have received permissions through our MDOC EdTech to be able to help with a little bit of the web design for the Alliance site. So that has been amazing. We're about to get Leo in on that action. And it has been so fun and educational and enlightening. I would love to see a lot more of the programs that you're discussing and talking about, because there's endless potential. And with these investments in IT, security is pretty much covered if you have a professional who knows what they're doing and can track the progress that's going through the cloud of the edits that people are making on site. So that's so great. Thank you.
Yes, lots happening around big tech and currently incarcerated folks. Things are definitely moving. So excellent question. Thank you for asking it. We are unfortunately out of time. If you have a question that we weren't able to get to, please drop it in the chat and we will promise to address it next week. And if you haven't yet registered, please do so. We would love to have you back. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Victoria and Leo. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Bye.
All love. Thank you. Thank you for making time for this.